The Very Serious Crafts podcast is on Patreon. Visit patreon.com/seriouscrafts to support our podcast, find out about our Patreon half-stitched episodes, and more.
Hello, and welcome to Season 4, Episode 12 of the Very Serious Crafts podcast. I'm Molly from Wild Olive.
And I'm Haley from Red Handled Scissors and the Bones and Bobbins podcast. Today, we'll be talking about things we didn't know then, but now we know better.
Yes, and I'm going to just put this out here right now. I don't have a lot prepared for today's episode, but I feel like this is the kind of topic...
Me neither.
Yeah, I feel like this is the kind of topic where once you start talking about it, you discover those things in the midst of the conversation. So
yeah, that's what I was thinking. Before we jump into talking, we want to give a shout out to our serious friend of the Very Serious Crafts podcast, who is now supporting us on patreon.com/seriouscrafts. Many thanks to Allison. You're the best.
Thank you, Allison, for joining us.
Yes, thank you.
So,
there are lots of things in this world that would have been a lot easier had I just known the little obvious next step to it.
Yes.
I'm good at making things hard.
Or like trying to figure out the thing so much on your own and just not getting to the answer. Like
Yes.
The answer is out there, but clearly you didn't have it.
No. And someone knows it.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is one of the problems with being a professional or being not a beginner at something. It's that you don't always remember what you didn't know because you're coming to any project with a base knowledge that seems obvious to you.
Yes.
But if you're writing or designing something at beginner level, those are the things that you need to remember in order to be effective. And I think that's just incredibly difficult to do if you yourself aren't a complete beginner to something.
Yes. I would, it's the you don't know what you don't know thing.
Yeah.
But also, I think that sometimes it happens. I know that I'm guilty of teaching in this way. Mm-hmm. But when some things are obvious to you, you don't include them in the instructions.
Oh, that's exactly it. Yeah.
Right? So then as someone who's coming to learn it, you might miss out on those obvious instructions. And I try to be better about that. I will also confess, this is like pulling back the curtain on writing craft tutorials. I have been commissioned with creating articles about things that I'm not an expert in because...
Me too.
Because you are... What I'm good at is technical writing surrounding craft. And so that's right. Why people would ask me to create something, which means I have to research how to do the thing and then show it.
And you know how to do that.
Right. And I know it well enough to make it happen, but I might not know a certain step well enough to explain it well. And if it doesn't feel 100% necessary, I might not include it because I go, well, I'm only including the absolute necessary here. Sometimes that's just a word count issue.
Yeah, I think sort of along the same vein, and I think I've said this before, that I not infrequently have agreed to teach things that I don't know how to do.
It's a great way to learn.
Specifically, well, because it's a great way to learn, and because I am confident in my ability to learn it and to be good at it. Like, if I've said yes, it's a thing that I am quite certain that I can do.
Yes.
And then I'm approaching it with those beginner questions.
Yes.
Which often really helps sort that out. And so I have many times pitched tutorial ideas for things that I did not know how to do.
Mm-hmm. I have done that.
Specifically because I want to learn them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And because I've got an idea and I know that this is how to get to there. But not knowing how to do it, I feel like it's sort of one of those things where, like, if you don't know, you have the audacity to think it will be fine.
Uh-huh.
And because you do, it is.
Yes. This is not in the category of, I wish that I'd known this before,
Mm-hmm.
And now I know better. But I will say, I did recently propose an idea for it was for elementary age students to be able to make a paper mache periscope that looks like an ostrich. Because why wouldn't you? It all went together with a thing, but like making a periscope there's scientific things, it's simple, but you have to get some angles correct. You have to and then it has to all be, in this case it had to be in tubes that I was then going to cover with paper mache.
Right.
And I proposed it without knowing if it was going to work or not. I assumed that I could make it work, but I didn't 100% know. Guess what? It worked pretty much. It worked well enough for what the goal was, And so sometimes
I think
that happens.
that happens a lot.
Yeah.
Because almost never, if I'm pitching something to like a publication, have I done the thing, because I don't have the time to waste.
Exactly.
To do work that isn't going to do anything.
Exactly.
And so, I think that's normal.
Yeah.
But when I was thinking about this topic, specifically the thing that came to mind was like the little tiny thing.
Yes.
That if you happen to be self-taught, you just might not ever pick up until you see someone else doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, oh. And my specific one of these is, you know how when you're using a serger and like you continue chaining off the end for a little while?
Yes. It's been a long time since I used a serger. So I'm just going to,
But you know what it looks like.
I remember this process. Yes.
And it never occurred to me that I should be doing something other than cutting it off.
Aha. Uh-huh.
And I then saw someone, I want to say it was like at Craftcation or something, who was using a darning needle to just loop those few chain stitches back under the serge stitches. And I was looking around like, excuse me? Like, you mean that didn't need to slowly come undone? Over years, I could have just done that.
That one quick thing.
So,
yeah. I have not personally owned a serger. My mom used to. She actually she owned two over the course of time, and I don't think either of them are still here. But I remember when she got her second one, it came with a free class at the place that it came from, and she chose to send me instead because she had already been using a serger for a while. So she said, you go take this class. And I feel like I kind of remember someone showing that step that feels familiar, but it has been, it's probably been over 15 years since I've used a serger.
And I mean, it's one of those things that once you know it, you're like, oh, of course.
Yeah.
That I like weaving in ends and knitting. Oh, of course. Like that is what you do with this excess. But it really blew my mind.
I actually, similar note, I felt that way when I watched I took an online quilting class,
Mm-hmm.
and when they were burying the threads from the quilting, the first time that I saw that, I was like, wait, what? I was like, oh, that's what you're doing. Okay, then. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And you should probably explain that because I imagine there are several people listening who are going, wait, you're doing
You're
what?
doing what? Yeah, again, I don't do this very often, so I would have to have a refresher on it before I would do this actively. But basically, like, when you're quilting something and you are starting like in the middle of a quilt with your quilting, you're going to have threads on the top and the bottom. So you don't want just those threads, loose. You don't want to just finish things off with like back stitching or anything. So you literally are taking those threads and you bring them down to the bottom. You deal with them there, correct? Am I remembering this accurately?
I only have done it in hand quilting. Though I assume that you would be doing a similar thing no matter where, because you would just leave a tail and then bring it in. But in hand quilting specifically, when knotting off the end of a length of thread, you
like you
then take that end and pull it back through the fabric.
Yes. But
so it pops into the center of the quilt, and then you sort of move it around a bit to
and then
get
it's all
of the threads
right
back in place, but it's very secure, and it takes a little pulling to do it. But once it's there, it buries that knot and the tail of the thread.
So you've pulled
in the center, like in the quilted part.
And in fact, like burying a knot or hiding a knot that way, that works in a lot of cases where you are sewing by hand, especially if you're joining
so many
and you just pop it through the fabric, hopefully not ruining your fabric. And you have to have the right weave to make that work, the right size knot. It's not just anything, but
and a solid wiggle.
Yep, exactly. Get a nice little wiggle in there, and
it's not a fast jerking thing. It is a steady, firm pull sort of thing.
Yep. And just kind of watching it and working it through. I will say there's been some times when I've done just a little jerk. I've just like popped it through in the the right circumstance, but it's risky. You have to, be careful of that. But yeah,
I often will make like drilling a pilot hole almost.
Yes.
I will take the needle and just stretch out.
Yep, exactly. Just wiggle the needle in the
then
fabric. Yep.
Pull the knot through.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, and people who have no idea what we're talking about, I think this might be one of those things you have to see.
Yeah.
To have it make complete sense.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I mean, I've even I think that would be that process of wiggling your knot through, popping your knot through and burying the end. You would see that probably with like embroidering doll faces. That would have been a
for sure
typical way of doing that, because often you have to do that.
Or sewing on children, like eyes.
Yes.
And things.
Yes, exactly.
Children, you would bury both ends.
Right. And so it has to be, because you would do that after you have no access to the back of the fabric. So, yeah, that's how you Get
And
that
so
in.
sometimes you have to do it at an angle and have the needle come out the other side again,
Yep.
and then snip the thread and pull everything back in so that thread goes back into the wow.
I like that sound effect.
I'm I'm sorry, everyone who has misophonia.
Yeah.
But yes, if you don't know what we're talking about, do tell us, and perhaps we will make a that would be a really solid ASMR.
Yeah.
Just the popping
Yep.
of the knots
Yep.
through the.
It's right up there with the sound of a French knot being made. Or a colonial knot.
Oh, I
Yeah.
feel so soothed.
Okay. Similar to the ends of your threads, I just recently learned a way. I've obviously seen this, like I've kind of I knew that this was a thing and I thought that I understood it, but dealing with ends of yarn when working on crochet, like when you're joining on a new color, I just learned a way of wrapping the yarn over like your chain stitches that is really secure. Never learned that until like 2 weeks ago.
Oh, that's funny. That is a thing that I learned. Oh, who did I learn it from? Oh, Debbie Stoller.
Yeah,
in one of her crochet books, and then I guess I've seen her do it in person.
Yeah.
But that was one of the, like, changing colors was one of the things that drove me crazy.
Well, because
and
obviously
I wanted really seamless color changes.
Yeah.
And there were techniques for that.
Yeah. All of
I don't know. They broke my brain in a good way.
All of the ends on something, when you think like,
I never have an end on a crochet project. I always,
yeah, because it's maddening.
Stitch over it.
Right. But also then, and this came out of me actually taking a craftsy class, which I don't always, I rarely will sit down and like watch an extensive class on anything. That's not my, I like to get things in written form as much as possible.
I don't like video. I want to see it or see it written.
Exactly.
I want to see a photo or see it written.
But I
don't have time to.
Exactly. That's how I feel. But taking this particular class was, it was very helpful because I picked up a number of things. Similarly, this instructor, when ending off a round of crochet, the way that she pulled the yarn through and then used that to like connect it to the next stitch to join around seamlessly and then instantly work the end in, I was like, what have I been doing?
I know exactly what you're talking about.
So basically, you've got your last loop.
Like, what witchcraft is this?
You've got your last loop of crochet. You snip your yarn off, pull the loop through, like, so you've just got the yarn end, thread your darning needle, take that through your last stitch. It makes it look like a loop of stitch because it is, and then you just work it in from there. So not only does it look beautiful, you're taking the time to weave in your end at that moment. What?
Yeah. Why wouldn't you?
It was mind-blowing to me, and it just simplified a process so much. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it takes out the fiddly things that make a project difficult for someone who doesn't do that kind of project all the time. Like, it removes some of the questions.
Yeah.
Just by removing confusing visual cues.
Right. And anytime that you can, like, essentially do two things at the same time, like it's going to serve like dual purpose that's just smart crafting.
Well, it's smart, and it's also usually more secure.
Exactly.
Because it's incorporated into the actual project instead of being an afterthought. And I really appreciate that.
Yes.
Another good area to pull in or pull the knots into the center is if you're doing blanket stitch, if you're going to crochet onto something.
Okay.
Like pulling the ends of the knots on the blanket stitch on either end really makes that a nice, clean surface.
Okay. That's
and
a good
I like that.
Good one to remember. Yeah.
And that is if you're crocheting edging on a fabric blanket.
Yes.
Not.
Which I have still not done that, although it's on my list of things that I really, really want to do. It just hasn't happened yet.
I like to do it on pockets.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be
like
good.
Just a little bit of lace.
I
or on collars.
Okay. I know someone who she uses a like perforating rotary blade that makes, just the little slits in your fabric, and she uses that on the edges of her quilts so that then she can blanket stitch and then crochet edges on quilts with that blade, pre-making the holes, which saves some effort there.
Well, and it saves some friction. It makes it's easier on your hands.
It's quite possible that she's just then like crocheting directly instead of embroidering the blanket stitch on first. She's just able to crochet
and I
through
suspect
it.
that that is what's happening, which makes all the sense in the world. Similarly, when I was learning how to make bobbin lace, one of the first steps that I learned that I would later forget and then relearn was that you should it's called pre-pricking your patterns. And basically you have a little it's called a needle vise. That is just a handle on a needle that you poke all of the places that your pins for your lace are going to be on or within the pattern, because not having that friction of making a new hole keeps things more precise and makes the tension easier and also feels better on your hands.
Interesting.
If you're placing like 2,000 pins in a row.
Yeah. Wow. Interesting. That makes sense though. It is.
Yep. Then I forgot about it, and then I was like, that doesn't really need to be done. And then I relearned why.
Yep. That's the thing with a lot of these is like a lot of them you don't just get there naturally. It's a thing that someone has to tell you to do because who would have thought?
Right. Well, it's like how I did not know how to correctly do satin stitch until I was teaching someone else who did the thing naturally, and I went, oh.
I'm still gonna say here, both the way that you were doing it and the way that your friend was doing it, both are correct. They are just different versions. So
they are both correct. The way that my friend was doing it was significantly less bulky.
Yeah.
And so it
yeah,
it lays nicer and it doesn't make me mad. And
that's what you want. That's what you want.
I really don't like satin stitch.
See, and
so
I feel the same way about stem stitch.
Ooh, I like stem stitch.
And see, when I got started, I was thoroughly confused between stem stitch and outline stitch because essentially they're the same. but they really are not. And
Right.
let me just say, Mary Corbett of Needle and Thread very kindly put me in my place. But like took the time, because here's what was happening for me. I could not get it to lay nice. And so what I started doing, which also there is a version, it is, it's still a valid stitch version, where I was taking and I was working it more like back stitch, because I found that I could get it to look nicer that way. So I would make a stitch, come out like away from the stitch, and then go back down next to the first stitch. Because if you're unfamiliar with these embroidery stitches, both stem stitch and outline stitch kind of have like these like semi-half overlapping stitches next to each other to make a line. I just could not get it to play nice with me. But the difference between the two, and again, had I paid attention to diagrams of the stitches, again, we just in our last half stitch episode, we talked about old embroidery or old craft books and how they actually a lot of times have more helpful diagrams and whatnot. But the biggest difference between these two is one, you work with the thread above your line of stitching, and the other, you work with it below your line of stitching. But as Mary Corbett pointed out, it makes a difference based on the twist of your thread. And
they twist in different directions.
So if you're working with one kind of thread and you're trying to use the wrong kind of stitch, it will be more difficult. It's just how it is. So
it's true. And yeah, you're right that they do look almost like the operation for doing them is almost identical, and sometimes they're visually almost identical depending on what it is that you're using them for.
Yes.
But there's a significant difference if you're doing a lot of one thing on something flat.
Yeah.
With very little additional distraction.
Yeah. Anyway, it was like, that was one of those moments where I was like, wait a minute. What's happening with this stitch? So, yeah.
I think that is one where I had to go to my older stitching dictionaries and such, because the modern style of illustration and step out photos doesn't necessarily give you the information that you need.
Yeah. I think also you don't see outline stitch used as much anymore.
No.
And I
think probably because it's harder to explain.
Could be. It could also be that the twist of threads is more in favor of stem stitch now. That like what is commonly used, either an S twist or a Z twist. Now we get into we're getting very technical on some of these things, but that's okay. We're very serious about this.
Well, if you do them right next to each other, they look like a braid.
Oh, that's true.
If you do them literally up against each other.
Yeah.
Just in case you ever need to do some hair.
Yeah.
But they look like a very neat braid. Anyway, but I do think you're right. I think that the twisting of the usually used skeins of like 6 strand embroidery floss does lend itself better to stem stitch.
Yes. Yeah.
But what is it? Pearl cotton?
Yeah.
I think lends itself better to outline stitch, but it's been a while.
Yeah, I don't think that I've... Again, I still, even though I know better now, I still don't generally choose to use either of those stitches. So, it's been a while since I've tried that with pearl cotton.
I
but,
like a good split stitch.
Interesting.
That is my go-to for a chunky solid line.
Okay. Interesting.
Yep. But only if I have used an even number of strands of embroidery floss.
Okay. Now see, here's where we get into something, because when I learned that you could that one technique for doing split stitch is actually to have, and this is now how I teach split stitch. If you have an odd number of strands, you actually have the opportunity to split through one of those strands and have your line be more solid than if you might end up between two strands. So, yeah.
That is true. And I don't usually do it that way because I find the even split to be satisfying, but you're completely right. That makes all the sense in the world if the focus is making that line as complete as possible.
Because again,
that doesn't bother
me. Your even split will give you the look of a braid a little bit more, and which in that case I tend to go for chain stitch. Different look, but I don't. I've become a big chain stitch fan.
I like chain stitch in certain things. Yeah. It depends on if I'm going for a retro look or not.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Because chain stitch reminds me of like old leather jackets and stuff.
Yeah.
Of which I had one.
I
because
also did. Well, mine was not like antique, but a friend gave me theirs because I.
Oh no! I mean, I had one because I was a varsity athlete.
See, I wasn't an athlete. No. I was homeschooled and not an athlete, so that wasn't going to happen. So someone just gave me theirs. They didn't want it anymore.
That's cool. It's funny that when I say that now to people, they look at me like I have 3 heads. And, like, I don't know, guys. I was a skilled competitive athlete for a long time.
Yep.
I may not look like I have hand-eye coordination, but I for sure... Well, I did gymnastics for 15 years, and I ran track, specifically hurdles, and that's the impressive did varsity swimming and diving.
I think the hurdles is the most impressive because
it is real easy to overthink that and fall on your face.
I was also thinking like you're not a very large, like a very tall person.
No, but I can jump high.
There you go. So,
but you're not supposed to in hurdles. Like, they're adjustable.
Okay.
So you're supposed to go over them as high as you can, but it needs to be at a height reasonable for your personal height and stride. Okay. Although most of the time we didn't bother to change them because between races it just didn't make sense because we were lazy. And so I often ended up running excessively high hurdles, which slows you down when you're jumping up, not forward.
Yeah.
But whatever. It was fun.
I love it.
It's good to know how to tuck and roll when you do that particular sport.
See? Things that I didn't know, but now I do.
Yeah, I don't recommend. Oh gosh, it would be a disaster if I did it now.
Oh, yeah, no, I would. That's not going to happen.
I don't think my legs do that anymore.
Listen, I'm just trying to climb stairs now without hurting myself because that's the age I am.
I'd like to not pull a hamstring, which I do if I look at it wrong. So,
yeah. All right.
Anyway, wow, that went side quest.
Mm-hmm. That was good. That's good.
Yes.
Yeah, I think but this is the point of digging into these topics and seeing where they goes, because you might learn something new, whether it be how to finish the chain stitching on your serging, or how to jump a hurdle. Like, you never know.
Well, it's more how you don't die if you fail to jump the hurdle. That's the tuck and roll.
See, how to not die in any circumstance, always helpful.
Tucking and rolling is almost always the answer for that.
Okay. I mean, in one sense, you could see, like, you kind of were tucking and rolling that surged chain stitch, really.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That is precisely what was happening.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's what's happening when you pull the knots through, like,
tuck and roll.
All of the things. And we have brought it full circle, just like that crochet project.
Exactly. Seamless finishing.
Yes.
Excellent.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think we better end it there. I don't think we're going to do better.
Yep.
If you, listeners, have any, like, you wish you'd known tips and tricks to share with the rest of us, do tell us, because we want to know and we want to tell other people.
Yeah, I think this is...
And we want to credit you for it.
Yes, and I think this also could be a good a good little tip box we could put up, like, on Instagram. So watch for that. Be sure you're following us, because I think that this would be a good thing to share that way. We'll work on that.
Oh yeah, I like it.
Yeah.
So definitely send them to us so we have more than just what we said here.
Yeah.
Because that'll be more helpful.
Yeah.
And on that note.
Yes.
Thanks for listening to the Very Serious Crafts podcast. You can follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Serious Crafts, and on Facebook at Very Serious Crafts. You can also find show notes and all things Very Serious Crafts at veryseriouscrafts.com. And finally, if you're a fan of the Very Serious Crafts podcast, or maybe just tucking and rolling, please leave us a 5-star review on whichever platform you use to listen to podcasts. Good ratings help us show up in recommendations, which helps more people who love crafting find us.
That's right.
Indeed.
And that is, like, the perfect way to weave in all the ends of this episode.
Oh boy, there we are.
Yep.
I knew that we had to have one.
Yeah.
And I feel like I need to hit the dad joke alarm. I think we should have a dad joke alarm. Like a sound effect. Dad joke!
Yeah, like that wasn't very punny. Except that it was, so that's confusing. All right, we better sign off.
Yeah, we gotta go.
All right, bye!
Bye!